Alright guys, we're at this stage where there's literally 770 heroes in Fire Emblem Heroes. That means that these analysis videos get bigger and bigger and bigger. This one is pretty important though, I'd say, so strap in and enjoy.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing another Fire Emblem Heroes video. As you no doubt can tell probably by either the thumbnail or the title of the video, this video is focused on support characters. And I feel like this video probably overdue for quite a while, but it is a very important video actually. Instead of discussing like power creep and new heroes and how powerful they are in the meta, there's usually one truth that's happened over the years, and that is that support characters generally are good investments or good one-offs or just good to have in your barracks overall. And what I want to showcase in this video is basically a tier list-ish ranking or recognition of some of the best 5 stars and non-5 stars, a couple of GHBs in here as well, of characters that are really good to have in your barracks. Maybe not necessarily to summon for, but definitely stuff you shouldn't fodder your last copy of because they could come in and out of the meta. Now I did spend a pretty significant portion of time going through the cast of heroes. It's getting quite big, to find all the support characters that I saw, plus of course looking at my own barracks and experience. So if I missed something, I'm sorry, feel free to let me know in the comments for sure. There is definitely going to be something missing here, and I don't cover every single hero in this video, obviously, as there's probably about 50 of them, or 60, even more than that, honestly. So there's quite a bit here, but I will touch on some of the most important ones, and likely suggest why they might be considered to show up in your barracks at some point. I don't think necessarily summoning or sparking for these characters is really good, unless you're really into summoner duels, where they probably will matter quite a bit, but generally speaking, they're really good for every mode, minus probably Arena. Arena being the exception, but Arena Assault, Aether raids, summoner duels, you're going to get a lot of value off of what the characters I'm going to discuss in this video. Now before we begin, as always, I'm going to ask you to smash that like button and sub if you haven't already, because I know that some of you still haven't, but I have been noticing the results of you guys liking the videos. I've been noticing people subbing and the comments you guys leave and such. The feedback is really important to me, and that is the best way to do it, the best F2P way, and I really appreciate it. It's really shown on some of the latest videos, and it means a lot to me. Thank you. If you really want to also support all the time and effort I put into these videos, then maybe consider the Patreon description below or the join button on YouTube. That's the best way as well when it comes to supporting what I do. If you don't, it's cool. I get it. Now, let's talk about what this video is meant to be, which is support characters. I wanted to showcase 2 examples here before we jump in any tier lists and rankings and make you understand what exactly I'm going at here, which is with 2 Aether raids teams on the left. So this is basically my notes and what I feel about support characters. They're flexible, they can be thrown on many teams, they're time resistant. A lot of characters such as Brave Lucina have been relevant for years and are still relevant because of the breath support effect she has. They're meta resistant for the most part, meaning depending on the meta, it doesn't really matter whether you know, there's these certain effects that like counter a red unit, for example, or a blue tank like Vector. You know, at the end of the day, you're probably going to combine your support with another tank, and that means that the support lasted longer. And finally, they're pretty budget, like they're pretty friendly when it comes to merges. You don't really need to merge them. They usually sit behind your tanks or in the corner of the maps, and they don't necessarily have to see combat. It's nice if they have merges and can do combat, but it's not really necessary, and that's why they're great to talk about and discuss in this video. So what I want to showcase on the screenshot here on the left is 2 variations of a tanking team. So what you'll see is that my tank is Tiki here, and my support on one of them is Ashnard, and on the other one it's Flame. Now you can do this with many variations, but what I think is very important with team comp creation is you have to understand, and it ties into like the Aether raids video I did a while back on Mythics and whatnot, and Legendary videos and a bunch of other guides, is knowing how to do team comp creation is very important. I want to take this team as an example. You have your Mythics, the 3 Mythics, the bonus unit in Julia, my tank being Tiki, and then the support slot being Ashnard or Flame. And with other tanks, such as let's say Brave Ike, you can do something like Brave Lucina or you can do something like Moosebell for more damage, or Niffle for speed and res and damage reduction, and kind of like fill out those slots. But what I'm getting at here is, yes, Ashnard here is going to appreciate merges because he's actually acting as a more melee tank support role, where he's taking matchups away from Tiki and helping her get better matchup because of his Gurgurant and Rain effect. But generally speaking, you can have your tank like in front and then your supports behind. A lot of these strategies still tie into other stuff too, such as hidden run strategies, where maybe you want to have Bridal Fjorm or just another dancer as a support slot, and combine your team comps this way to really succeed in, let's say, Aether raids. But you can also apply this logic to many other game modes, PvE or summoner duels. Combining different supports, tanks, carries, whatever that might be, is fundamental in a strategy game like this, okay? So I hope this kind of makes sense, but if it doesn't, again, let me know in the comments with some questions. You can also join me on Twitch, where I'm live usually 5 days a week, and I answer as live as I can to try to clarify some of these complications. Alright, so what I want to jump into here is the 1-off 5 stars in heroes that I think are the most relevant to have in your barracks for multiple modes. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not going to go over every single 5-star here, and notably there's not Mythics, Legendaries, and no dancers on this list besides Rafiel. But the reason he's on this list isn't because he's a dancer, that's just an addition to his support capabilities. Now I'm going to cover a couple of these characters, I'm not going to cover all of them. If you don't remember their effects and such, feel free to jump over to the, I believe, Heroes Wiki, and you'll find all the information you need to like remind yourself what they do. They're not ordered horizontally as well, such as Bridal Catria could very well be better than Yuri, or Yuri could be better than Catria, or Chrom could be the best or the worst in their tiers. Don't look at them horizontally, look at them more vertically. And I'll try to explain exactly why all these characters are in the place they are. Nonetheless, they're all relevant in some way, even in today's game, and I definitely want to go over them. The higher a character is on this list, the more useful it is to have on your team, and generally speaking is applicable to most teams in general. So like anyone here on the S can really be slotted into, I'd say, most teams that you run into. There's some notable exceptions there, like Bridal Fjorm, there's no point in bringing against a dancer, but like a team that doesn't have a dancer. But generally speaking, if you have a character up here, they're going to be really good in a lot of team comps. And then slowly more specific as you go down this list. So again, if you disagree or you have some insight as to why you think things aren't the way they are, just show me in the comments, it's fine. I'm totally open to that. But this is just my opinion, and this is how I feel about these characters after both seeing them and using many of them. So yeah, these characters, and you'll notice some have been here for pretty much years, such as Brave Lucina or Flane, who's been used pretty much since she was released. And then obviously some characters that just aren't meta relevant right now, such as Layla at the bottom, but I'm sure if like anti-save skills existed, then Layla could very well just be higher up. Or they're just more niche in the case of like Gatekeeper. So there's a lot of intricacies to using a lot of these supports, but nonetheless they can find places in many teams, and at the end of the day they don't need merges. They're gonna fall in and out of the meta, and if they're in your barracks you can probably find places to use them quite often. So let's go over some of the best choices here and why they're so good and why you might want to consider picking them up. Notably, Rafiel here isn't even a 5-star, he's just a seasonal 4-star focus limited, and I think everyone should, I'd hardly say this, but I do think most of you or everyone should at least consider a single copy whenever his rerun comes back, because he is that good. Whether that's in air offense or in summoner duels, you're going to see him a lot, and he's really powerful. And his effect is pretty simple. It's just literally one special acceleration to his ally support. You'd think something like that wouldn't be as good as it is, but it really is, because this can be used on characters who have no business getting special acceleration, such as Cavs or Armors or Flyers, who usually can't really receive this if it isn't stuff like Legendary Hector or Pent or very specific characters. Now we have Dual Chrom, who obviously can accelerate with Change Fate in his weapon, and that's why he's so good, and what I talked about in, I believe, one of the previous videos. But Rafiel is very good because you can target who to support, they get that acceleration, and then he just fits into so many good strategies because of that. Now, what really sets him apart from someone like Valoria, who has 2 charge acceleration with on support, is the fact that he can dance. So he ends up filling a dancer role, which is just by nature good support. And the dancers aren't on here because they're pretty much all the same. So Rafiel is a support, plus he has that dance. So he fits in really nicely as a kind of unit you can splash onto many teams, just have to throw around the ally support, and really create these super shenanigan type things where you can charge AoE specials, or you can charge like Deadeyes or Sacred Cowls with Hardy Fighters or Aegis. You know, this is really flexible in how powerful someone like Rafiel can be. It's also why Dual Chrom will be as good as he is. But yeah, let's also not mention, but Rafiel fits really well into beast-type teams, such as Fallen Edelgard or Ashe. But yeah, let's talk a little bit further into this, which is Yuri. Now, you might think that Yuri isn't really a support, but the only thing he has for supportive capabilities is pretty much foul play. But this alone makes him this good, because foul play combined with his Canto of 2 movement means that you are effectively getting way out of danger and setting up positions that are almost always favorable. Whether this is an AR offense, or the AI using it in AR defense, which may not always be good, or, of course, summoner duels, where you pretty much will have a positional advantage just by nature of having Yuri on your team. So this is really strong. It's a 3-move swap, plus his Canto lets him position into somewhere that's even better for him. And that's why he's up here, because no one else in this game pretty much has that much mobility and movement. The only things that come close are obviously the Chroms, like Legendary Chrom and Dual Chrom, and the new Lucina plus Legendary Lucina. And of course, they are good and have lasted the test of time because of those effects. So of course, Yuri will be up here, even if he doesn't really contribute much to combat, which at the moment he definitely does. But foul play alone puts him up the top because mobility is super important in this game. Next up is Winter Bernadetta. Now, Winter Bernadetta might not seem like a support because in reality she's not really. The only thing that's supportive is she just ends up doing 1 point of recoil damage at the beginning of the turn if she is at 100% HP. Now, that might seem pretty insignificant. Like, why would you want to do 1 recoil damage? But the thing is, some assist skills require you to take some damage before they're usable. Of course, I'm talking about Ardent Sacrifice, Reciprocal Aid, and the Micaiah heals, or just heals in general, such as Physic or Martyr or whatever, those kind of heals. So the reason this is so good is because this effect is unique to Winter Bernadetta and literally enables certain strategies, notably Vantage. Vantage strategies are solely usually require like combat, where you have to like get in the unit, take some fury recoil damage, or take a combat hit back, and then you set up your Vantage strategy. With Winter Bernadetta, you can like circumvent this whole idea by just having Winter Bernadetta on the team, getting that recoil damage in, and then using either Reciprocal Aid or Ardent Sacrifice, setting up your Vantage without relying on combat. And this is so powerful that it obviously just can win games on its own, and it makes Vantage as a strategy in AR offense still possible because of this one character. It's unfortunate she is as limited as she is, but hey, maybe Hall of Forms will come back next year with 3 houses and Winter Bernadetta will finally get that time. Or we might get another character who has some sort of self-recoil damage, or team recoil damage in the case of Bernadetta. But at the moment, that effect is so good to enable new strategies in the game that she deserves a mention right here at the top. I'm going to skip Dual Chrom in this particular video because it was literally in yesterday's video that I talked about him, or I believe a couple days ago, so go check that out if you want my opinion on Chrom and change fate in his weapon. But he is obviously similar to what Rafiel is accomplishing, which is accelerating units who otherwise shouldn't be accelerated. The next up we'll talk about here is Dual Dagr. Now, Dual Dagr acts as a Pathfinder unit that can be blessed pretty much in any season and anywhere. But what is very nice here is the fact that she's also a flyer. Being a flyer means that you have access to other mobility skills such as aerobatics, flyer formation, and I guess the orders and guidance effects, which are still going to be okay depending on who exactly is on the team, such as armors won't really take advantage of Pathfinder as much, but cavalry units and just high movement units in general really appreciate Pathfinder, and Dual Dagr is up here. One thing I haven't mentioned in this video up until this point is the impact of dual skills. Now, dual skills are really good for Arena if you choose to merge these guys up to +10, or they're really good for Summoner duels, where you definitely will use them to your advantage. But for Aether raids, you likely will not use them because there's just dual hindrance on any of the good teams that you run into. So I don't really consider dual skills in terms of support because they are a little bit more limited into where and when you can use them. But they are notable in the fact, like here, Dual Dagr has like team kind of ish wide Pathfinder, and that can really enable some crazily good strats. Just wanted to mention it, but it isn't really what's defining a lot of these characters. And I will talk about the Mythics, the Legendaries, and the Duels in a later section of this video. Just I wanted to make sure I'm talking mostly about the 5-star one-offs that aren't Mythics or Legendaries and such. Okay, next up is Bridal Catria. Believe it or not, this isolation effect is pretty much limited still in the current day. It's only on Bridal Catria, Mila, and I believe Dual Hilda's duo effect, which you probably won't see too much use. But the fact that Bridal Catria still has this very powerful effect on her weapon and it isn't widely spread amongst different units makes her still one of the best supports in the game. You want isolation when you're doing something like a hit and run strat. You probably want isolation when you're running a tank strat where you really want to shut down a dancer who could potentially cause some havoc to maybe reach a backline or enable a nuker to kill your tanks. So Bridal Catria is very powerful in a lot of team comps. The only place that I can't see too much use for her is probably Summoner duels, but even there, depending on what map there is, if it's a more vertical kind of map, or possibly horizontal, where you can line up your starting turns to hit stuff, then Bridal Catria can probably still find a lot of use even there to work. Although Dual Hilda might just be better, but Bridal Catria is still very powerful and still very unique to this day, and I still use her in plenty of team comps as a result of that. Finally, rounding out like the best support units in the game, in my opinion, is Bridal Catria. Now, she is currently on a Hero Fest, and she is a new player's Hero Fest as well banner that I do think is worth picking up at least a single copy of. Bridal Catria enables so many different units to do things they shouldn't be doing. And I featured this idea in the Jomke like weapon refine video, well, the weapon refine video that featured Jomke, where Jomke just is able to basically kill all the big tanks in the game because he can quad desperation. So he has desperation at full health, or as long as he wins a speed check. And then because of Catria, he has a Brave effect. You combine those two effects, and you have this unit who's attacking 4 times before anyone else can attack. It's not something unique to Jomke. There's a couple other characters can do it, such as Ullr, but Ullr is more restrictive. But it's a good example of what Bridal Catria can enable. And there are definitely just defense teams that are just oriented completely because of Bridal Catria, just designed around it, and that's why the existence probably of Elamine exists just because of Bridal Catria. But despite this counterplay, it doesn't really matter. Both Gatekeeper and Elamine are counterplay to Bridal Catria, but she's still going to be really strong, and you can't necessarily always shut down every single lane, so you're still going to see her all over the place, and she's still going to enable these really good strats that involve super nuking tanks and opponents and just literally getting kills all over the place. So Bridal Catria needs to be up here, and if you haven't got one, it's like everything here in the S is almost a must-have, and I don't like recommending this sort of thing, but generally speaking, a lot of this stuff is very good to have in your barracks to run different strategies or just round out, you know, your gameplay experience, maybe to make the most out of it. Generally speaking, I do recommend summoning for Mythics and Legendaries and providing yourself a steady progression that way for higher rankings, but when it comes to being able to just enjoy different types of strats or just have the strongest supports in the game that you throw onto different teams, the guys at the top here are obviously really good for that. Now, I'm not going to go over the rest of this because this video obviously will go on forever, and I do have another section right now involving the Mythics, Legendaries, a couple duos, and GHBs, but I wanted to briefly mention some of the stuff in the lower tiers and why they're there at all. Obviously, Lancina has fallen off a little bit due to the introduction of breath seals, but she's still very good when you choose not to use those breath seals. Loki can splash guard on the opponents, which is notably good. Kent can accelerate all tome users, including Cavs, Flyers, and Armors, which is really good. Valoria, unfortunately, isn't, in my opinion, as good as Rafiel, despite her accelerating by 2, only because she doesn't really contribute as much as Rafael's dance capabilities. Flame is very powerful and a staple on most tank teams. If anything, she's probably as close to this S as I would have put her, but because she only fits into tank teams, I kind of can't, I don't feel like that's right. She doesn't really fit into other comps as well. And Brave Marianne, being a combat dancer, is super unique for stuff like hit and run strategies and Gale Force strats, which I use very commonly. The guys in the B and the C are definitely more specific as well, even more than the stuff you'll see in the A, where Gatekeeper has this really interesting obstruct no teleportation mechanic, and I feel he was the counter to Bridal Catria before Elamine existed. Moonspell gives a lot of attack power to a lot of characters. Combining him in Advantage, Winter Bernadetta strat, for example, can make your unit kill almost everything, or at least near everything. Niffle is slightly different from Flame, where she only has a first attack damage reduction plus giving speed and res, but she is better at combat. Warrior Princess Hanoka has this really good weapon for tons of attack and lowering opponent's attack speed defense, I believe, so it's really good. So you can see where a lot of this lies, but you can pretty much find place for a lot of these characters in many different team comps. Now I wanted to continue and talk about some of the other supports, legendaries, mythics, and GHBs that I haven't mentioned in this video, which are all these guys. Now, the reason that this is a separate list is, well, first of all, it'd be very, very big if I put it all into one list, but the reason these ones aren't on there with the other list is because you can only really use them in specific places. So legendaries, mythics, and dancers, well, dancers you can put onto most teams, but I feel like legendaries, mythics, and the gimmicky GHB units, they are generally either seasonal specific or enemy team comp specific. So you'd obviously be using Reeve when you want to like shut down legendary Sigurd or Yuri, and you'd obviously be using legendaries when they're in season. So in AR offense, you shouldn't be using someone like legendary Elwood when it's not win season, or legendary Byleth's no follow-up effect if it's not water season, right? So, and the same idea with mythics. They usually should be in season. Well, they should always be in season for air offense, but when it comes to obviously summon or duels, then a lot of these characters are still going to be pretty specific in their use cases, but they could complement a lot of teams. The dancers and dual dancers obviously are just the best supports of their class. So the mythic dancers are, in my opinion, still the best mythics in any season. They're not really outclassed by anything, despite characters like Elamine or Mila existing. It doesn't matter. A dancer in this game is going to be your best support regardless. So if you have the dual dancers, they're pretty much just better versions of any of the other dancers in the game, minus Rafiel, who has a very specific reason to be used. And then the mythic dancers, if you have them both either on defense or on offense, are just going to be staples. Like they generally are not going to be replaced. Whereas stuff like Elamine will sometimes be really good and sometimes not so good depending on what team comps you use. So just examples of that. Okay guys, so yeah, I hope this gave you some perspective on supports and how I feel about them and how they should be used or invested into or possibly summoned for, depending on how you feel in your game. And a lot of this gameplay is of course featured on my Twitch channel, where I stream 5 days daily, and I do cover some commentaries on YouTube and try to of course cover builds and stuff for this. So be sure to check the other videos on YouTube and see exactly where I'm going with this. And finally, to just conclude everything, there is the big list. Now, the ones at the bottom are obviously not necessarily worse than the ones at the top. They're just more specific characters such as the legendaries and mythics. So anyways guys, as always, let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if this helped you. Smash the like button and sub if you haven't already. It really does help, and I do put a lot of time and effort into these videos. I had to research over 700 characters to see who exactly would fit this sort of support role. These are the characters I came down to. There's probably some missing that I haven't included on this list, I'm sure, but generally speaking, a lot of these are very good options on many teams. That's it for me, guys. Thank you for watching as always. I hope you enjoyed the video. Much love, and see you soon. Peace.
It's over.